I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. Can you stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Karen?
Second.
Melissa, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. Approval of the minutes from December 12th. I know there will be an abstention of Michelle, but all in favor, an abstention.
So moved.
Second.
Karen, Melissa, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then Michelle.
Abstain.
Thank you. So the first presentation, actually Dr. Semmel's going to talk about this.
Yep, so the first presentation is just a request by the Social Studies Department to go on their trip next school year, the close-up program. You've heard from them a number of times. You actually just heard from them last month, where they reported back to how this year's trip went. So they're requesting that they are able to do it again next year. So we would just need a motion to approve the trip.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the out-of-state field trip for students in grades 9 through 12 at Terryville High School to Washington, D.C. from November 10th, 2019 through November 16th, 2019. Motion, oh, that's it.
All right, Karen made the motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion prior to? I didn't think so. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
I will let them know. Mr. Schuman is the one who's scheduled to go next year down to Washington, D.C., so he's very excited, and I'll let him know that you guys have approved that.
Okay. So the next presentation is going to be Dr. Semmel. He's going to go up to the podium. We all should have a copy of his presentation. We're going to hold all questions until the end, if you guys don't mind.
All right, thank you. And I do want to point out to our people who might be watching at home, I'm not sure how great the PowerPoint up here will be, but if you go onto our website, and this is again to the people at home, if you go onto our website and you go under Board of Education and down to budget, you'll see budget information on 1920, and this presentation is right online. So if you wanted to go there because something might be difficult to see, but the full presentation is there. And then once this video is completed, we will be posting this complete video. So anybody who misses the presentation, who wants to see the full thing, they'll have a chance to go online and see that. But I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to the Board of Education about the superintendent's proposed budget. At this time, I'm able to propose a particular budget. There'll still be plenty of opportunity for the board to discuss and have their own thoughts on this. So I'm going to bring you through about the next 30 minutes to walk you through this. So stay with me, try to stay engaged, and I'll do my best to keep you engaged. We're hoping that what I can do tonight is outline some of the successes that the school, the education department has had with our kids. Therefore, how we use the money and the successes we've had. But I also want to outline the challenges that we face. I want to talk about some of the funding gap that has been created here in town. And certainly I also want to highlight the fact that the state budget crisis that occurred last year, where we ended up having to lose a number of staff, you'll see in this year's particular budget presentation, myself trying to bring some of that staff back. Because we lost a number of people that we didn't want to lose, and we have some proposals to bring that back. So it does take a team in order to make this, put this budget together. The principals are here tonight. They spent a lot of time, so did folks like Ms. Parsons and Ms. Trinks and Mr. Hendrickson, to put the budget that's going to be in front of you tonight. But also the Board of Education members in terms of the goals and your impact as we move forward through this. I'm going to go through a couple of these slides pretty quickly. But just keep in mind our mission to challenge, inspire, and prepare all students for success in the ever-changing and complex world. The goals, I don't want to spend a lot of time on because we've spent time talking at the beginning of the years when these were passed by the Board of Education, but I think it's important to note them and to have them part of the presentation because they are in large part how the budget is developed. Speaking of that, this slide about the whole child, sometimes people don't always realize that we do more than just educate, and just do the academics. We really are about the social, emotional, cognitive, character, physical, and academic pieces of what makes a child. And we work in concert with our families to help develop the entire child. We focus a lot on academics. That's one of our main priorities. But there's a lot of other things that go on into a school system when we educate a child. I want to start with some of the recent accomplishments, and this won't be exhaustive, but it will highlight some of the things that you've already seen along the way. To start, we have our Smarter Balance scores, and I'm sharing with you over time the increase that we've seen from 14-15 to 17-18 in both math and English language arts. And those scores represent the 3 through 8 scores in terms of our SBAC scores. So there's been some definite movement in terms of our Smarter Balance scores over time. Another recent accomplishment is what I call the meteoric rise in advanced placement participation, where one of the goals of the school system is to try to make sure we're challenging all of our students and giving them as many opportunities as possible. So when you look at this slide, back in 14-15, 9% of all the students in the building were taking an AP class. Fast forward a few years to this particular school year, and you've got about a third of the entire school building taking AP courses. And that is a range of courses, from the newest one this year, AP Government and Politics, to ones that have been around for a long time, like AP Calculus. So now there's 9 courses that we're offering, and our work with the high school this year is to offer AP Computer Science going into next year. So there'll be a 10th AP course offered. So therefore, kids who are thinking about that, that computer software piece will also have an opportunity to take that class. Another recent accomplishment is our 4-year cohort graduation. Give a lot of credit to Mr. Holtz and his team here at the high school. For many, many years, the graduation rate has been in this mid-80s to sometimes it goes into the upper 80s. But for the class of 2018, the 92.3% graduation rate is something to be very excited about. With small class sizes, every child counts quite a bit in a percentage. But to see it go into the 92% range shows that we're making some really good strides in keeping all of our students engaged in education, therefore giving them greater opportunities when they leave. And I want to note, with graduation rates, there are always kids that need to stay a 5th and 6th year, and it could be for special education reasons. They actually count against us in this number, but that's just life. We're willing to take that coming against us because we know those children need the additional years here, and it's right to do that. I think another piece that's really important for the board to understand, for our staff to understand, and especially our parents of kids maybe who aren't at the high school, is that our students get accepted to a wide range of colleges. And I asked the guidance department to put together the last 4 classes where they've been accepted. This is where they've been accepted, not necessarily where they chose to go. But they could have gone if they wanted to. And families will make decisions about where they choose to go for many different reasons, and that's not our call. But the next slide's hard to see here online, but I wanted to point out a few. You've got places like on this slide, Arizona State, Boston College, Boston University, Bryant, Cornell, Emerson, Fairfield, Hofstra. On the next page, you've got schools like Northeastern, Penn State, Purdue, Quinnipiac, Rensselaer Polytechnic, Sacred Heart, Smith, the Citadel, University of Arizona, University of Oklahoma. And on to the last slide here, you have Trinity, Tufts, UConn, UPenn, UMass, Wentworth Institute of Technology, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. I think it's important for people to recognize that if you go to Terryville High School, the number of schools that are available to you upon graduation are many. And I was impressed to see this myself. And I think there may be a perception by parents that that's not the case. And so I wanted to include this, hoping that people would recognize, yeah, our kids are quality, and they're well prepared and can get into some very excellent schools. For financial reasons, sometimes people make the Tunxis decision and then transfer to UConn or Central. That's a very smart economic decision, and that's okay, and I'm fully comfortable with that. But we do want kids to be able to get into schools that they want to get into and pursue their passions. Continuing the recent accomplishments, SAT obviously leads into where kids can get into schools. Yes, in some schools they've gone away from SAT scores, but it's still a very predominant way of getting in. So our SAT math scores have made some significant increases since 2016. And in the chart below, you see how our juniors, all different kids, class 2016 juniors, 2017, all different kids, but the scores on the PSAT are going up. They're going all in the right direction. So more and more kids are scoring higher on the English and the math sections, and those percentages are the percentage of kids who are meeting the benchmark as set by the state. So that's another piece of very nice recent accomplishment. And then some, on this final slide of accomplishments, we've been really focused on safety, and Mr. Vigliotti and SRO Brody went out to every building, worked with every principal, identified all the safety needs at each school. Then we came back and we developed a capital improvement plan that we submitted to Capital Improvement Commission, trying to identify those things like cameras and bollards and entrances to schools. So that's been a big part of our work. We also, Mr. Hendrickson, working with Mr. Mazon, put together a grant request through the state. They offered a grant for safety, so that we'll hear back in March. So that's been a major focus. Obviously, you guys all know about social emotional learning work that we've done in the district. That's going very well. Making sure our kids have access to technology. Mr. Trudeau and his group really make sure that Wi-Fi is up and running and that our kids have access to the Chromebooks. They work well. EduClimber, which just started this year, we have Mr. Fedorkevich, who's one of the tech folks who's been leading that work with Ms. Parsons. And our teachers, our school data teams, our district data teams have really been using data more precisely this year to help our students. Our curriculum is being captured better through now an electronic platform, and Reader's Workshop has made it all the way up to grade 7 with plans to move it to grade 8 next year. So those are all the recent accomplishments that I wanted to highlight so far. But I also thought it's important, important to talk about our efficiencies. Because one thing that the Plymouth Board of Education has been is efficient with its money. And I'm going to share some other information with you later to show you that you've been very efficient. And in some cases, we're falling far behind some of our peers in terms of what I call the funding gap. And I want to talk about that a little bit more later. But in terms of efficiencies, we made a huge move last year to get out of self-insurance and to get into the state plan 2.0. And it's paying off in very significant financial dividends for us. And the insurance is still a high-quality insurance for our staff. Probably, it might even be considered the best insurance in the state. That's my own opinion. It may not be everybody's opinion, but it's an excellent insurance. We've also reduced the number of outplay students. So we've brought a high number of students back into district. I think the current number, we've gone from 18 down to 11. 18 down to 12, because we just had a recent change there. And I want to make sure people, I think the board knows, but when you bring a student back from an outplacement, you don't just save all that money. There are things we need to do in the district to allow that to happen. And I'm going to share some of those things because they're going to be ongoing costs moving forward. We've also reduced a bus run. You always hear parents and people say those buses are empty, they're empty. The bus company does look every year, and they felt the ability to reduce from 15 to 14, and we've done that, saving money there. And we've also hired some staff internally to save money. Those are things like hiring a board-certified behavior analyst, the teacher for the hearing impaired, which allowed us to bring some students back, and actually allowed us to avoid sending some students out. And our food service program that we brought back in-house a couple of years ago continues to operate in the black, where it was operating in the negative when it was done by an outside agency. So there's been those efficiencies. I already mentioned that we're applying for a state security grant. I will say we do sit down and pay attention to every position before we post it when we have an opening to see if it's still the appropriate position or if we need to change it in some way. The town actually pays us funds for some of our technology services, so we actually service the town, including a number of places in the town hall, police department. Mr. Trudeau, again, there is valuable in making sure those services are offered. So we have a nice collaboration with them. And it's also important to note we're going to do a facility study this year. It's been held off because of budget cuts. The Finance and Operations Committee just looked at a RFP that will go out. The plan there is to see what our demographics are going to look like over the next 10 years and how to best use our facilities. But I want to caution you, that will not impact 1920. We will not have anything coming forward that says, for 1920, this is what we're going to do. So there'll be work as we end this school year and start next year to make some decisions, or at least have good information for the board to operate from when it comes to demographics and when it comes to our facilities. All right, these slides you've seen if you've been on the board or if you've been paying attention to our presentations. I know Mr. Kilduff from the Board of Finance is also present tonight, and we appreciate him being present. He's seen this slide in terms of how we compare to the spending per pupil that other towns compare. So this is called the net current expenditure per pupil. And this is what the state uses to do an apple-to-apple comparison from one district to another. So all of the costs for all of the same categories can be calculated using the new EFS. It used to be called the ED001, and they're allowed to aggregate all the costs, divide by the number of enrollment, and that's how they come up with a per pupil. This is the most legitimate way to actually compare. So these schools are all in our DERG, which means they're similar to us in economics. If you see in the purple in the upper right, this is the 16-17 data. This is what I showed last year. And there was a $2,500 difference between us and the state median. And I told you last year, if we had the state median, we'd have $3.5 million more in our budget. That was last year. This is this year's slide. The state median actually went up $1,000 in the 17-18 data. We had to double check this, but our net cost actually is exactly equivalent when you round to the dollar from the 16-17 to the 17-18. That's why it's still 14,526. We've moved down, therefore becoming even spending less per pupil in terms of being relative to the DERG. You see that only Enfield and Wolcott spend less than us in our DERG. You can look at those one on top of the other, and it's pretty visual. You can see how the red line is moving further left, and our blue line is moving further right. Our distance from that is now $3,500 per child from the state median. So that's now a $5 million gap between what we currently receive and what we would receive if we received the median. And remember from your math classes, median means that 50% of the folks are above it and 50% are below it. So we're just talking about if we were to be in the exact middle, it'd be $5 million more to our budget. So I think those are important for people to pay attention to. From the fact that we're very efficient, we don't spend very much money on our education. But this is also starting to become a little alarming because we're not providing as many opportunities to our students that other districts are able to. I also think it's important to look at inflation, also called consumer price index. And this graph here just shows how we're not even meeting inflation over the past 8-9 years. And cumulatively, we're 6 points behind where inflation is at this point. So we're unable to afford what we used to be able to afford because inflation, we have not kept up even with inflation. So again, another important piece to be aware. You may guess what this means, but I want you to think about it for a second. 153 out of 166. Pause for just a moment. If you lined up every single district, all 166, and you put the first one in the front of the line, and you put the 166 at the end of the line, Plymouth would fall in at 153. So we're in the bottom 10% in terms of funding per pupil. So again, it's another just comparison, especially, I want to share this data because sometimes people complain to the board that you're spending too much, that your spending is out of control. There are people I've heard say these things. But this is the types of data that says, no, it's not true. In fact, we're one of the most efficient districts in the state of Connecticut. But it also, on the flip side, means that we're really not offering as many opportunities to our students. There are two sides to that coin. So some of the challenges we're facing, and then I'll get into some of the meat and potatoes. We are well below the state median funding. We have a new governor who was just sworn in today, and we're not sure where education cost sharing is going to go or excess cost reimbursement. I'm going to show you where our free and reduced lunch population now lives, which means you're going to see a rise in our student need, which typically needs additional support. And special education costs are definitely difficult to predict. Here's how we do it. We take who we have now in the district. We say, if they were to be with us next year with a 3%, say, price inflation, because that's what we typically see, about a 3% price inflation for outplacements, that's what we put into our budget. We don't put in fake extra students. We don't predict that there'll be 2 more, 3 more, 4 more. We put in what we know. And that's what makes things very challenging to predict. Because I don't know if tomorrow someone's going to move into the district that it requires high needs or moves out. And that's why we always have to be very careful and cautious about our spending as we go through the year, because things can change literally overnight. So those are some of the challenges we're facing. Continuing with some of the challenges, I think it's important to note that Plymouth went from 31.1% free and reduced lunch to essentially 41% free and reduced lunch. So the needs of the students coming to us are greater. It's just important to be aware of that. And that's a significant increase. So in terms of our priorities, our budget priorities moving forward, we do want to balance our student needs and the additional costs of the town. I think we've shown we're a very good partner with the town, and we need to be aware of that. We want to continue to look at safety, but we have to look at increasing student achievement. We have to make sure we continue to march to our mission. We want to continue to develop classroom libraries and instructional materials K-12, continue to develop and capture and refine our new standards, the curriculum. And we want to keep our 1-to-1 device ratio going for our kids 6 to 12. And we've done very well along those, that device piece. We're actually adding more opportunities for our elementary kids when we have them. So what's some of the notable items that we want to add? This list is very small. This is just the equipment items. Our teachers need to be more mobile, and so instead of the desktop type machines that they have, they're very old now, and Rich is always telling me how much we need to replace them. We're moving more towards laptops because teachers are going to data team meetings. They need the computers with them. And if you've ever watched an elementary teacher work, if they have a desktop, they have to run over and scurry to the desktop from their reading section, and it just breaks the flow. So having the laptop being more literally flexible to get them to different spaces will help them. Readers and Writers Workshop to the 8th grade will cost a little bit of money. We need to make sure our Wi-Fi continues to work at a high rate, and that does mean some maintenance there. And then you'll see later what we would like to do at Plymouth Center in terms of grade 2, and that will also require that we add some additional classroom resources for a third library there for a third second grade class. The staff is really some of the notable changes that I want to make sure I point out to you guys. First thing to pay attention to is the music piece. And this may get some more conversation, which is perfectly fine. But next year, 1920, you're going to see the middle school student population be the largest it's going to be for the foreseeable future. You have the largest class in the district in 7th grade right now, and you have the second largest, or at least equal to the second largest, in 5th grade. So the middle school will have the 2 largest classes in the district. That's posing some challenges this year, even with scheduling. And so our plan is to, if only for 1 year, if it doesn't make a longer term process, moving part of the high school music staff from the high school to the middle school to help allow for class sizes in the core classes to be smaller. Because the middle school is struggling with places that kids can go for music or other electives in order to reduce the class sizes in the core classes. So that's a way of solving that problem, at least in the short run, without adding additional money. Someone could say just add additional staff, but that would be adding additional costs. So that is our current thought process. The choir and the band at the high school are your 2 major classes, and those, of course, would stay intact, and there would be a third class that the teacher would teach here. The other 2 classes are traditionally much, much, much smaller. So there would be very few students who would lose services by this teacher going to the middle school to help out. We're also looking to see if there's any opportunity to have the elementary music teacher provide some support at the middle school. The other thing that's important to note is that our French at the high school continues to dwindle in enrollment, and we believe it's time to teach it out. What that means really is make sure that the current French students get their 3 years of French, but then not continue to offer it. So we wouldn't offer a French 1 next year, so therefore we'd only need 2 sections of French, thus allowing us to cut back on benefits and on some salary. So there's some savings there. That's why it's in parentheses. You'll hear more about this at the workshop, but we really have been seeing some significant needs at Fisher Elementary School, not just in at recess or in the cafeteria, but those are 2 areas where we've had some issues popping up, but just everyday issues where we believe a dean of students is absolutely appropriate. And Fisher Elementary School being our Title I school, there are funds specifically allocated for additional staff at the Title I school. So we would advocate for having a dean of students, which would be a teacher position. It would be 180. It would be the same days as a teacher position, same as what we have at the middle school. We feel like that would be a very appropriate response. That's a prediction of the cost, including benefits for that position. The next position down is a literacy specialist, 612. Keep in mind, when we had to cut staff because of the $1 million we gave back to the town, we cut a literacy specialist at the high school. We cut a literacy specialist at the middle school. Our plan this year is to bring 1 person back to oversee all of the literacy programming 612, which means making sure the interventionists are doing exactly what they need to do, making sure that all the programming for our kids who need tiered support are getting it. And we're predicting with benefits that would cost around $90. Again, those are predictions. I can't see the future. We've already hired a teacher of the hearing impaired this year, and so we need to carry that forward. Otherwise, students who have come back from outplacements or would have needed them will need to go in those directions, which would cost us likely more money. So keeping the teacher of the hearing impaired is critical. The grade 3 tutor at PCS, I'm going to show you enrollment numbers in a minute for the 2 elementary schools, but we believe the tutor that we currently have now servicing 3 sections, 2 grade 1s and a grade 2, would stay on full time to work with the larger grade 3 class next year. So, and again, you'll see that in a minute. And we have a high number of special education students at Fisher Elementary School, where we've brought on a tutor to support the special education teachers this year. And it's believed at this time that we need to keep that tutor on because the numbers are not going to change for the better. So we're that tutor, keeping them on and moving them forward. So those are some of the notable staffing changes. You'll see when we get to the primary budget drivers that certified staff salary and non-certified staff salary is driving a lot of the budget increase. And you see a lot of the reasons up in front of you right there. So projected class sizes, we're projecting Fisher to look like this. The left side of the slide is current enrollment. The right side is projected. It's hard to project kindergarten enrollment at this time. So we typically just use the number that is in there for this year. Excuse me. So that could change. So we see a need for the 3 sections in each grade level at Fisher moving forward. And you see the class sizes would be in that 16 to 18 range, which is actually very, very suitable for learning for our students. Those are very nice class sizes for kids. Plymouth Center poses a different challenge. The challenge there is that the class sizes have it's a little bit more jagged. You see at Fisher, there's a very consistent enrollment. Here at Plymouth Center, we're seeing a little bit more jagged enrollment. So our proposal is for, again, the left-hand side is current and the right-hand side is future. If you look at the current 5th grade class, there's 50 kids, 3 sections, but the 4th grade class is only 45 students. So what we're going to recommend is that we only have 2 5th grade classes next year. We take that extra section, and instead of cutting it, we move it into grade 2, which would mean the current grade 1 classes that are large now would be brought down to a much more manageable 17. The challenge for us is what to do with the grade 2 class, which has had some conversation at the board. And our belief at this time is to keep on that tutor, like I mentioned before, but only service that particular classroom. So it's 27 students. We'd have a full-time teacher and a full-time tutor. And again, that could get some conversation during the workshop. We could talk about other ways of managing that. In the end, the board gets to, certainly have some say on that. We're trying to not necessarily add the extra teacher and have class sizes at 14 and 13, because that, of course, comes with a much bigger price tag. So we're trying to weigh what we think our students need with the additional costs. And we think that 27 with a tutor would be appropriate. And keep in mind, it's only January. I have no idea what's going to happen over the summer, because this 27 only popped itself up over the summer. So it could go to 32, and it could also come down to 22. So it's important to go slow and not, I think, make rash decisions that end up not being needed in the end. But that's what our proposal is at this point. So moving forward, and I know I spent a little bit of time on those, in terms of expenditures, you see that the schools themselves were not changing staff dramatically at the schools. Eli Terry and Terryville High School would get that extra literacy teacher built into those bar graphs. You see 3 years now of bar graphs there. Special education is a little bit misleading because some of the savings they have are in that transportation area. They've made $70,000 worth of savings for next year's budget, but that doesn't come off of that middle special ed line. The cost in that special ed line would likely be bigger if we didn't hire folks like the teacher for the hearing impaired or bring students back out from outplacements. So even though it's a little bit bigger of an increase, it only amounts to about a 3% increase. And in special education world, that's not a huge increase. The next slide is all about the drivers. And I told you that the salaries are a major driver, and this is not from contract negotiations, although we have been trying to make sure the teachers have gotten a few more steps, because over the years, they've gotten way behind. And we're not all that attractive of a district for people to come and teach in because our salaries are behind many other districts surrounding us. So we've been working with the board to provide steps. And over the last 6 years, teachers, well, including this 3-year contract, there'll be 4-step increases over the 6 years. But the bulk of that 454 is really about staff that we're trying to add back, given that we lost a number of staff, and these are the staff that we believe we need. The non-certified salaries, same thing. There's paras that we've had to hire when we brought students back from outplacements, so you see an increase there. But that healthcare, I remember when I first did these presentations, that healthcare number used to be in the $300,000 range, and it's $66,000 for next year. You see some major reductions in terms of special ed outplacements. That's the biggest reduction in our budget, $119,000. Special ed transportation reducing 70, diagnostic services reducing 53. So those are all reductions to the budget, the major reductions drivers. From historical increase, or in fact in 1819 decrease, you see that 6, 7, 7, 8, and 8, 9 were good years. You were having increases of 2.6 and 3.5%. It came down quite a bit over the last number of years. It's been a little jagged. And in 1819, we dropped by 0.72%. I think we only asked for 0.12%, and we still got a decrease. Part of that was we had made some very wise choices around health insurance, and so we were able to decrease some of our costs there. But we also worked very well with the town. If you include the $1 million we gave back to the town, which now allowed them to have a fund balance that's much healthier, which helps with their bond ratings and all those good things, which helps us borrow money as a town. But if you count that, we're more like a 4 or 5% decrease from that year. That didn't come off our bottom line, but it was money we didn't spend that year to try to make sure that the town was essentially not bankrupt. Because that's never good for a Board of Education either, for a town to go bankrupt. I'm not sure if that's officially possible for a town to go bankrupt, but when you've got no money in your fund balance and you're borrowing to pay operating bills, that's not a good position to be in. So I think through Mr. Kilduff's leadership and communication process, he's helped work to try to make the Board of Finance, or the finance, in a much better position. And I also learned that all of the audits now for town and Board of Ed side are completely caught up as of December 31st. So that's also very good news to hear for bond ratings and just the confidence we can have in our funding. So what is the overall budget change? All that turns out to be $478,000 increase, $478,874, or a 1.992% increase. Given where we've been over the last few years, we're really hoping that we're going to land somewhere in this range. I know the town's going to want to pay attention to mill rate, and they should, but we need to add some of the staff back that we lost, and a less than 2% increase is certainly not anything to choke on, especially given what we've been able to accomplish over the last few years to help the town end up being where they are now, in a much better position. What are some of the near and long-term financial risks? These are the ones I think. How will our newly elected state officials manage the debt crisis in the state? How will the decisions they make around the budget impact the funding for the town of Plymouth? I don't know what they're going to do. You don't know what they're going to do. They probably don't know what they're going to do yet. Let's hope that they're not deciding in November when we're in the middle of a budget year. Will the newly elected state officials add additional burdens to towns? I keep telling Henry Martin and Whit Betts, I don't care if you reduce unfunded mandates. Just stop adding them. Stop adding them, and I'll be happier. But they have yet to find a way to do that. And so that'll be I'll continue to tell them, please, please, I know you feel like you need to do something, but adding what they think is helpful to us ends up costing us in staffing that we need to add or burdens that we have to take care of. So I want them to be really thoughtful about what they do during this long legislative session. And to what extent will our student demographics change, and how will that impact the needs of our instructional programming? As our students get needier, that usually means additional support. If we're going to make sure that our kids who need to be challenged and our kids who are struggling and everybody in between gets what they need, you need to provide tiered support to do that. So in summary, I think it's clear, I think I've made a strong point that there is a significant funding gap that exists here between Plymouth and a lot of towns in this state. We've still managed to make gains in academic, social, emotional learning and opportunities for our students, but we are in the bottom 10% of funding. And I will tell you, without additional support, I think that the education system will start to lose ground. There's only so much that we can ask our teachers to try to do with students without adding the needed supports. I think we've been a great partner with the town. I think we've been nothing but transparent and communicative with the town, and I think it's helped lead to a improved financial health of the town. And so I think it's time that the town now see that there's an obligation to put us in a position where we get what we need moving forward into 1920. So that's the summary there. Timeline, next Wednesday, starting at 6 o'clock in the library, we'll have a budget workshop open to the public. It's a special meeting of the board, so it's a board meeting. We'll have a public comment opportunity, but it's a board meeting to discuss line by line. You'll have every line item for the board, plus this presentation. We can ask lots of questions. We have a second meeting on January 23rd, if necessary. Last year it was not needed, but if it's needed, we use it this year. And on the 13th, we come back here, this very same spot, and you have to adopt a budget. However long it takes, whatever you decide to do, because 2 days later, I need to get a budget to Town Hall, and that's part of the town charter. In March, we present to the Board of Finance. I predict March 21st, and then there'll be a meeting generally in the April timeframe to have a public meeting and make some final decisions about the town budget, which includes the board budget. So with all that, hope I didn't go too long. I might have went a little longer than I wanted, but to make a point, I need to make sure I went through those. So if there's questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we certainly have the workshop. So are there any questions that I can attempt to answer now? And before I open that, if you have questions between now and the workshop, I would please email me, and I will collect your questions, because it's a lot easier for us to collect data, during the week than in the moment. So I'd appreciate that. But if there's any questions now that you have, Cindy?
With the increase in the middle school, I don't see, outside of the music, you increasing staff. Why wouldn't we need to increase a little bit more staff at the middle school?
The overall total population increase ends up being about 9 to 12 students. So we've been working, Ms. Parsons has been working with Ms. Suffrage and Ms. Serrera, and they've been looking at how they can use the smaller class sizes in, say, grade 7 in order to have a grade 7 teacher maybe teach 4 sections of grade 7 and still have appropriate class sizes, and teach a grade 8 class thus reducing the class sizes. So we're working with them to see how we can use our resources at the middle school in order to do that. But the thing that kept getting in our way was that elective that we needed kids to go out to. And they didn't have a place to go, and therefore they were going to pool up in very large class sizes, which is why we looked to adding these music opportunities for students in the schedule. So we don't think we need additional staff for next year beyond what I pointed out.
Or adding an elective, because what are the electives that they have now?
What are the exact electives? Jen, you want to just, I know you probably have them off the...
Sure, so they have music, they have art. It's not necessarily elective, but we call them like the unified arts. They have art, they have music, they have innovative technologies, they have Latin American studies in 7th grade, and also PE and wellness.
Wouldn't PE and wellness be a part of the core, though?
When we say core, we talk about the core academic areas, so reading, writing, math, science, social studies.
Right. Electives at the middle school are slightly misnamed compared to the high school because they have to take all of them. The elective ends up being like do I take choir or band, or do I take general music? And by offering a couple extra sections of music, we're able to provide what we need in terms of flexibility at the middle school.
And without adding it, we would not have enough staff to teach general music, so students would have to take chorus or band. And there are students who prefer to learn more music theory instead of the performing, and so by adding the music teacher, we'll be able to offer the general music, which is part of our curriculum. We just, with 3 grade levels and the numbers next year, would be asking one teacher to teach 9 different courses.
Well, just with the extra rooms in the middle school, there's no more cooking, sewing, woodwork. So I just think that if you're only allowing music to extend, not every child, I think there's other courses that could be interesting, especially since that school is going to have the most amount of kids in it. I would think adding something more diverse rather than just, we need to put a few extra kids over here so class is smaller.
Remember, this is a 1-year issue. Then the 8th grade moves up to the high school. So we have to think long-term as well. So we want to solve the solution. We want to solve the problem. If we're going to add a teacher back and add something like tech ed or add back family consumer science, that's a conversation we can have. But that obviously is going to be a programmatic decision too. There's going to be curriculum costs that have to be added back in. All those other factors would have to play a part. And we had changed the tech ed course to the instructional technology class because quite frankly, it's very difficult to find tech ed teachers, and innovative technology is much more connecting kids to our STEM work and getting them into the technology and critical thinking along those ways. The high school tech ed teacher is doing excellent work around getting kids to use their minds and their hands to get into problem solving. At the middle school, the STEM classes has been evolving but ever improving course.
And then you said that a manageable class is 17, but at Plymouth Center you still want to keep the 2nd grade at 1 class level at 27, and by putting the tutor full-time. But you also said that we have the lowest per pupil expendage, so why aren't we trying to spend more money on more teachers at the most important ages of their lives, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, to teach them their basic reading, writing, and math, versus just paying a tutor? Why don't we want to extend to make sure that our younger children can go on and take the AP classes that you're offering in high school versus they can't take the AP classes because they didn't learn their basics in elementary?
I would say that you're making kind of a large leap there to say if they're in a class of 27, they can't take AP classes when they're in high school, but I get your point that, listen, when we get into the discussions, if the board wants to move into adding a 2nd, 3rd grade class and have class sizes of 13 and 14, we can talk about that. But I'm also grappling with the realities of what I've been facing with budget increases and what we actually get. So we want to talk about priorities at that point. What's more important? We'd have to have those conversations. And at this time, we're saying that a tutor with with the 27 students and a certified teacher is a workable solution there. Is it the best? Maybe not. But I don't have the $5 million that I would have if I had the median cost. If I had the $5 million, none of this would be a question. I'd be trying to figure out how to spend all that $5 million at this point. So we had to make some decisions around where we would put the money. And so, and again, the 27 could change to 24 by the time we're done with the school year. There's actually been a few ins and outs in even grade 1 and grade 2 this year at Plymouth Center. Some have left us, and some have come, and we've had some new students join us. So you don't know exactly what will happen, but it's open for conversation. We get to the workshop, so we'd be happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, even the 5th grade, it's going to be, 24, 25 kids, so.
22 and a half, I think. Well,
45 students.
22 and 23. Yeah, you see on the side there, it does the math out. It's 22.5, which means 22 in one section, 23 in others. And in 5th grade, that's a very manageable class. It's a very manageable class.
The concern, it's not really a question, Marty, it's just the concern and the perception that's coming out of this budget. And, I've been advocating for that 2nd grade teacher at Plymouth Center because I feel that's too big of a class size for the learning perspective of those children that are in that class. I think it's an unmanageable situation for that teacher. That's me personally. And that's talking from a business sense. The concern that I have with this budget is that now you're asking for a dean of students at Fisher Elementary School, which we've never ever had in the past. Our elementary schools have been run by principals and staff, and evidently they've been running relatively well. Now your concern is you need the dean of students there. It's going to cost you approximately $80,000. I think you're going to get a little bit of pushback from some individuals in town when it comes to looking at class sizes at Plymouth Center, all right, and bringing in a dean of students at Fisher Elementary. And the only reason why I say that, and it was even when I decided to move to Plymouth and buy a house here, people asked me, why did I buy a house on the Terryville side of town when I could have bought a house on the Plymouth side of town? And the reasoning that I gave them was because of the affordability. But most of the parents that I spoke to said that, Jer, you have to understand that Plymouth Center School gives kids, in their opinion, a better education than what the kids get. And at the time, my kids were going to Prospect Street School and Main Street School. They were diversified. It was Prospect Street School was K through 2, and then East Main or Main Street School, whatever you want to call it, was 3 through 5. Personally, I really didn't care as long as my kids were getting taught. But it's just a perception from people in this town who feel that Plymouth Center is the better elementary school, and that's why they choose to go on that side of town. So I think, in all honesty, when people see this, they're going to be very concerned about the education that their kids are getting at Plymouth Center. So I'm just doing it from my own opinion, from how people perceive what's going on at Plymouth Center concerning Fisher Elementary.
In that particular class or something?
Well, not only that particular class, but also that school in particular. Okay, so I would probably safe to assume that if with the dean of students, why you need them, I would probably have some information to individuals who are going to get up and ask, why do we need a dean of students at Fisher Elementary, that you explain to them the issues that are concerns for not only yourself, but also the principal that's there.
Actually, at the budget workshop, Ms. Loveland will be prepared to discuss that justification with you. Yep. Other questions?
I'm good, Dave.
Everybody good?
I'm good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We'll give the superintendent a moment to come back because he's going to go right into his update. Yeah. She said you don't need that.
Yeah. I guess because I took long enough there, we can do a quick update. First of all, I do want to make sure people are aware that we know we have the principal at Plymouth Center School retiring. We also just recently learned that our very own Ms. Trinks, who sits at the table with us, our Director of Special Education, is retiring also at the end of this year. So I just want to let people know that, first of all, we wish both Ms. Collins and Ms. Trinks well in retirement, although you still have a number of months here still. They're excellent administrators, and they'll enjoy retirement quite a bit. We do have we already started putting a process together to find the replacements. I will be sending an email out in my monthly update asking for some parents who are interested in participating in those interviews to let me know. And also, we typically have a board member, so I'll work with Melissa Johnson on identifying a board member to be a member of each of the initial interviews. And we've already identified some dates at the board level when finalists would come here. That's a few months out, but we always like to be ahead of schedule. Also, brown bag lunch for parents is on Wednesday, January 16th. We're going to talk about this budget presentation, so if parents have some questions, comments, things like that, they should come to the high school noon on January 16th, and we can talk. We'll also have the school resource officer present. He'll talk about how things are going in his world and give an update from that perspective. And then, Mr. Burbank, I'll leave the cave piece that I was going to say to you later during your board comments.
No, you can talk about cake, because I don't have a meeting schedule,
all right,
so I don't know when their meeting is, so you can talk about cake.
Then I'll mention it. The day on the Hill for your calendars is March 20th. I just happened to see that. I thought it might be coming your way as well. So, so March 20th is the day on the Hill, and we could go up to the Capitol.
It's late this year. It's usually like the first week in March.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. And that's all I have for updates, because I've spoken enough.
Any questions? Okay, moving on. So student reps, we'll start with Diana.
Well, first, we just wanted to say Happy New Year to everyone. I haven't seen you since last year. Sorry. So it's kind of a short little update because it's the new year, not much is happening. But the Terryville High School PTSA After Grad is doing a Krabby Owls fundraiser again this year. They did it last year, and it went really well, so we're doing it again.
Crossing off as you go.
It's on February 2nd, and it starts at 5 p.m., and it's an all-you-can-eat buffet for everyone that goes, and it's $20 for everyone 10 and over and $5 for everyone 10 and under. And it's a really fun night, and there's also going to be a bunch of raffles and stuff, and live music actually starts at 9. And so you can either buy tickets before from a bunch of the PTSA members, or me, if you ever find me around the school. And you can also buy tickets at the door, and so we just encourage everyone to come. So midterms start next Wednesday. Our first A-period midterm is on Wednesday. It's a full day, but the rest, the Thursday, Friday, and then the next Tuesday are all half days, and we're going to have 2 midterms. And all the students are very excited because we love midterms.
I'm just so excited. I've never been so excited for something ever.
Love them.
We'll have to do more of those.
Oh, yeah.
Do them every other day. I'd be thrilled.
And then finally, I have the class of 2022, which is the freshman class, is doing a Panera fundraiser at the Bristol Panera on January 31st. And so they want to have everyone stop down, and a part of the proceeds are going to go towards their class.
On the last day of winter break, we had a fun assembly where not only the band and chorus performed, but also the staff. It was really appreciated it.
Wait, you missed the staff and staff infection. Our staff, our very own staff band.
I thought that was a spelling mistake.
And who was in that band?
It's
Not exactly.
It was probably one of the best things I've seen by far. But also on January 29th at 6 p.m., there will be a student-parent AP night. This is where both parents and students will come to learn about AP classes and how it can benefit their student, and if the student wants to put themselves into that class, if they feel like they can do it. Personally, I take an AP class, and it's the best decision I've ever made. I love it. It's my favorite class that I go to all day. And it's definitely something that I was really nervous about when I was going into junior year, but now sophomores can take AP courses too. But it was definitely something I worried about, and now that I'm taking it, I couldn't be happier about it. But yeah, that's all I got.
So we had an elective fair at the high school on January 3rd. The freshmen and sophomores were able to come down and talk to their teachers about which electives they might want to take next year. And we also had a blood drive December 19th and had 27 pints of blood donated, which kind of averaged out to like 80 people that were helped just from our school, or just, yeah. And there's the Thomason and Terryville game this Friday here. The JV boys are at 3:45, girls varsity is at 5:30, and boys varsity is at 7. And girls basketball has a record of 1-6, boys basketball has a record of 1-5, and indoor track has 3 people who have already made states, Chris and Katie DeForest and Bella Christiana, and cheerleading has had a big increase in girls who are participating this year.
Any questions or comments for the ladies? Okay, moving on. Thank you. All right, so this is our first public comment. 3 minutes if you would like to make a comment. Just name, address, please. All right, going once. Mike, are you coming up to talk? Okay, moving on to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Karen,
Second.
Melissa, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. Thank you. Okay, so under new business.
Want me to take the new, so there's a couple of things going on under new business. We've been approached by the orphan grain train. They were looking for desks, chairs, and chalkboards, and they had seen some of those over at the Prospect Street School, and so they asked if they could have all of those. They actually asked it through Town Hall, and they connected with us. So we had Jim Mazon go out, take a look at the desks. Could they be useful to us in any way? And they really can't be. A lot of them are very old, very run down. So, and they're even going to have to take a look to see if there's mold on them, things like that. But in terms of giving them to somebody else, if they're willing to take them, we have no concerns about that. So we wouldn't be doing any of the work. The Board of Education staff wouldn't be doing anything. They're really just looking for permission to be able to go in and take the old desks, chairs, and chalkboards from Prospect Street, Main Street School, and send them to schools in the United States. So if there would be a motion and potential discussion, but we don't see any need to keep these things.
I'd like to make a motion to approve that the desks, chairs, and chalkboards at Prospect Street and Main Street schools being donated to the orphan grain train to be shipped overseas or to any impoverished schools within the United States that might be in need of them.
Second.
Second by Melissa. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so moved.
Okay, thank you. So we'll send a note to Town Hall letting them know. I'm also going to let them know that in terms of like Main Street School, we've turned that over to them. So really, like it's theirs. It's your place. And then after this next one, I'm going to say the same thing about like anything to do with Prospect Street School too. In terms of the Prospect Street School, which is the next piece of new business, as you know, the town has been trying to sell that. And back in 2008, January, it's interesting because you were right, Mr. Showers. You had said it was the exact same date, 10 years later. No, 11 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
11
exactly
years
11
later.
years.
January 9th, 2008, the Board of Ed at the time unanimously voted to give Prospect Street School back to the town. But at the time, they kept the field. They kept control of the field. They thought that they needed the field still, and so, but then there was a meeting on October 7th of that same year where the town council discussed those fields and whether or not when they were selling the property, about the field. So there's a lot of discussion about that. On November 5th of 2009, there was a unanimous decision by the town council to approve the contract bid for the sale of Prospect Street School, which was going to include the fields. Now, obviously, it didn't end up going through the deal, but they had agreed to sell everything. In October of 17, I was asked about the fields at Prospect Street School, so I did a little homework at the time, and we had not been using, I talked to our athletic directors, we had not been maintaining or using the fields at Prospect Street School as a Board of Education for at least 7 years. Parks and Rec had been maintaining them, so we had not been having any cost to maintain them, and our students didn't need them. So I sent a letter to them saying, as far as our use of them, we don't have any use of Prospect Street School fields. However, as you know, they're still looking to sell this property, and so I think in order to avoid any confusion, I think the Board of Education should make it clear that you don't have control of the building, which you've already given back, but also all the fields. You haven't used them or been maintaining them for the past 7 or 8 years, but anybody who's going to want to buy that place should know that there's a very clean title. And so I would recommend, and again, this language comes from the same language we used at Main Street School, except for the part about including all athletic fields. And we got the Main Street School wording from legal, from Shipman and Goodwin. Because we want to make sure that, especially when it comes to land deals and property, that all the legal ease is taken care of. So I wanted to bring this to you, give you a chance to get this completely, make it very clear about our intentions about Prospect Street School. So I would entertain a motion as it says below, if somebody would be.
I'll make a
willing to.
motion that the Plymouth Board of Education relinquish to the town of Plymouth control over all of the buildings, land, apparatus, and other property, including all athletic fields located at the former site of the Prospect Street School, located at 12 Prospect Street, Terryville, Connecticut, effective January 9th, 2019, in accordance with Section 10-220 of the Connecticut General Statutes, as such property is no longer being used for school purposes.
Second.
Melissa, second. Any discussion?
I just have a quick question, Marty. I was part of that Board of Education when we did that.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's redundant that we already gave the school back to the town,
Yep.
and now we're just giving it back again. So I don't know if we're just being redundant. I mean, the issue is the athletic field and the tennis courts that are back there.
Yep.
And I would assume the playground, because we never, technically when we gave the school back, it's just a physical building. So I don't know if we're just being redundant in saying that we're going to give you the school when we already gave you the school.
Right.
I don't know, did you get a legal opinion?
I did pass this by Bill Hamsey as well, the town attorney, and I said, here is the motion, and he wanted to make it very clear that the including all athletic fields was in there, but he was good with the way the motion read. And I think in this case, and I get your point completely, being completely redundant is fine, because we're not changing the Board of Education's decision back in 2009. It's just making it really clear that none of this is ours. So I get the redundancy. I grappled with that a little bit, but our town attorney is very comfortable with this language.
And I just want to like reiterate, him and I had lots of conversation about this. We over and over, like, do we this, do we not? And I just feel like let's just keep it clean, do it over, and it's very clear. Because again, if somebody comes back later and says, well, the first motion didn't say this, the second motion said this, so let's just make it clean. And you're right, it's redundant, but let's just make sure it's clean.
Well, the concern that I have is that in 2008, we gave up the building. We're being redundant again, so if somebody decides that, well, did you really give up the building? Now all of a sudden we have to pay all the maintenance costs prior to, from 2008 till now. So I just want to make sure the redundancy that we're going through, it doesn't come back, and I don't want to use certain terminology, but I don't want it to kick us in the butt, saying that, okay, from 2008 to 2019, even though the town was putting money into oil that we weren't doing, now you have to pay all those back.
Actually, with all the questions being raised on Facebook right now, this is the best way to go.
You know,
We just get it done. This way, there's no more questions from anybody.
personally, I'm not really concerned about Facebook. I just want to make sure. I just want to make sure that we don't have to incur any costs from 2008 to 2019 because of either redundancy or because of the Board of Ed at that time. We probably decided to keep those fields because we needed them, for school facilities, especially when it was easy for, at the time, I think the high school was right there at the time. Well, the high school wasn't built yet, was it, Karen? Was this high school here?
I think they're around the same time.
Yeah, so I think we may have been using the field up top for the high school to practice soccer. That's why we.
Right, there was a specific reason.
Right, so I just want to make sure that.
I think I'd be more concerned about it if it was owned, if we had relinquished control to a private company or whatever. I mean, it literally would be the town back charging us for maintenance fees, which is ridiculous when you think about the things that we've done for the town. If they were to actually do something like that, they would be creating such a bad blood between us that just seems ridiculous to me that they would do that.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
These are just scenarios.
Yeah, I hear you.
These are concerns that, not that I don't have, it's just that scenarios that are going through my mind that I don't all of a sudden find out 2 meetings from now that, here's a bill.
Right.
I mean, it could be $10, could be $1 million, doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that even though we're being redundant, that people understand that we gave that building up and it wasn't ours in the first
Well, it's in the
place.
records that we did too, so that's good. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments before I call for the vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passed.
right,
Thank
so-
you, everybody.
And we'll send a letter to the town about that action as well.
All right, board committee reports, Karen?
Yes, the Finance Operations Subcommittee met prior to this board meeting. The subcommittee reviewed the accounts by facility report for the month of December 2018, and this report will be forwarded to the Town of Plymouth Board of Finance. The Finance Operations Subcommittee held a special meeting on December 17th, 2018, to address a request to add an additional bus stop at North Harwington and Preston Road in Terryville. Following the presentation of both parties, the subcommittee decided to support the Board of Education's decision to keep the bus stop where it is. And also, Mr. Hendrickson, business manager, reviewed the facilities study request for proposals with the Finance Operations Subcommittee this evening, and we will be looking for some bids on that.
Any questions? Okay, moving on. Right here. Okay.
Hi. Student Achievement, the next meeting for the Student Achievement Subcommittee is on Thursday, January 24th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in the conference room at Central Office.
Okay, thank you. Public comment? Going once, going twice. Okay, board liaisons. Greg, would you like to start?
There was no meeting. They canceled it for last month.
Okay, thank you. Josiah,
Same thing, it got canceled.
I just heard about that. Miss Cindy.
Okay, so for the middle school, basketball is starting, so we're selling concessions again at the middle school to help prevent children from crossing the street to Rite Aid or Dunkin' Donuts to keep the students in the building. The cheerleading coach, Ms. Alarcon, also has several students that are trying out for the new mascot so they're excited to have the brand new Bulldog mascot at the middle school. Our townwide skate night is February 12th from 6 to 8, and our next PTA meeting is on January 29th, where we'll start to talk about the end of the year celebrations. So we need parents to come and let us know what they want for their children's night. For the Booster Club, these are our new shirts that the middle school also gives away free shirts at the basketball games. And this is the first year we're doing it at the high school, so we have the Terryville Roos on the front and the business sponsors on the back, and the cheerleaders will be giving these out at halftime. So Friday's home game with Thomaston, it should be really packed, really exciting, and the girls will throw these out at both varsity games. We are doing an IGA roundup next week, January 13th to the 19th for the Booster Club. We are also, we just submitted the request form, but we would like to do a McDonald's family fundraiser night on February 21st from 5 to 8. And we are also doing concessions, so on Friday we'll have hot dogs and pizza and candy because the kids will be at school for a very long time that day as well. So we want to keep the kids in school safe and fed and help the Booster Club make some extra money.
Do you have any questions? What is a roundup?
So Terryville, the roundup, you know, if you buy your groceries and it's like $13.50, the cashier will say,
okay,
do you want to round up 50 cents?
Thank you. I appreciate
so
it.
any nonprofit organization can go to IGA, submit the paperwork, and they give us a week. So on our 1 week to help the public know what the Booster Club is, help sponsor the Geese Away program on the fields to keep the geese off the tracks and stuff. That was a very large expense that we had, and unfortunately we didn't get a grant that we were hoping for. And, you know, we help with scholarships and stuff like that. So we wrote up a nice little thing for other people in the town that might not know what the Booster Club does to help them know. Great.
Thank you. Okay, Karen.
Yes, the Terryville High School PTSA met on January 3rd. They have an extremely busy 2 months coming up in February and March. As Diana mentioned, there's a Krabby Al's fundraiser on Saturday, February 2nd, and they are taking donations for raffle baskets if anyone is interested in donating. There's going to be a paint night. Their request is submitted and waiting for approval. So once approved, there will be a paint night on February 8th. And also waiting on approval is the Harlem Wizards game on Friday, March 8th. At Eli Terry Junior Middle School, which is a big community event. They're looking for not just high school kids to go, but more of the younger students to attend that. We've had that in the past, and it's been a very popular event. They are looking to schedule a casino bus trip on March 23rd, which is a Saturday. And there is updates on the Facebook page if you would like to check it out. It's THS Project Grad Gift, and that allows you to see updates, and also there is a button that you can donate if you want to just do a direct donation. Also, they wanted me to remind everyone that at the old Main Street School there is a Planet Aid box, and it's one of those boxes where you put in your clothing items. So cleaning out closets and getting ready for the spring coming up, just donate any clothing, shoes, blankets, towels. They are all recycled and used for other purposes, and a small donation is made to the PTSA for that.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, do you want to take Seppa since Dick's not here?
I don't think she does.
No,
but I will. On December 13th, we had our Challenging Behaviors Workshop, which was extremely well attended. It was an excellent workshop. And then this coming Thursday, January 17th at 7 p.m., we will be hosting a Sit for Autism workshop, which is a training for anyone who's interested in babysitting children who have autism. That location has been changed from Fisher to Terryville High School in the library. That's all I have.
Yeah, the meeting next Wednesday morning
Yes, we do. We do have a meeting next Wednesday morning.
at Lucky Cup.
Lucky
So
Cup,
any member
9:30
gets
morning.
free coffee or a tea. So,
Yeah.
9:30.
Yes.
Any questions? Jerry, do you have anything for Kate?
Well, unfortunately, Kate doesn't send me their meeting schedule, so. And then when they do, when I show up, there's no meeting. So they never tell me that there is. So unfortunately, I have nothing for Kate other than what Dr. Semmel said that, Day on the Hill is what, March 20th?
March 20th, yep.
Okay, so anybody who is interested in attending Day on the Hill, please let Pat know. I'm sure she'll send an email out to the us individuals on the board if anybody's interested in attending. I would probably safe to assume that it's probably a good time to go because more than likely the new governor will probably come in and address the schools and kind of give us an update on where he's planning on going. Especially when he puts in his budget proposal for next year, and I'm sure that's coming down the pike. So.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, I haven't gotten to my first meeting for Ed Advance, that's next month, but I am meeting with their director next week, so I should have an update of something for next week.
Mrs. Johnson, I would talk to Mrs. Colessa, because I know when Mrs. Colessa used to do Ed Advance, she used to have nice meals.
Yes,
over
I
at Ed
did.
Advance. So
I missed their dinners.
It might be fortuitous for you to speak to Mrs. Colessa to find out what's on the menu.
Would you like to join me?
Because, no, but I think it would be in your best interest to talk to Mrs. Colessa. Mrs. Colessa always used to let us know that the
what I was
meal
having
was
for dinner?
definitely good, so.
Thank you.
They would send a menu ahead of time.
Yeah, there you go. See, I told you.
I'll let you know.
Well, you don't have to let me know. You should collude with Mrs. Colessa so she can update you on the benefits of being at Ed Advance.
Any last board comments before I make mine?
Oh, I have a board comment. Okay. For those individuals that are concerned about the budget proposal that Dr. Semmel gave this evening, it would be in your best interest to at least come and voice your concerns at our budget hearing, which is
Next
Wednesday.
next Wednesday. Okay, it'll be held in the library.
Starting at
Start
6.
at 6 o'clock. So if you have any questions or concerns, or you don't have to come in with pitchforks and axes, but it would be just for us to understand from the board where everybody in this town is coming from, so that when we present the budget to the finance board and the town council, that we have a grip on what everybody in this town has concerns of. Because personally, I usually hear stuff after the budget goes like, why didn't you do this and why didn't you do that? Well, unfortunately, if you didn't come to tell me, how am I supposed to know?
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. I just want to thank Dr. Semmel and the whole entire admin team for putting their budget together. I know it's many months, so I appreciate all your work. And actually, that's it, because Jerry kind of took what I was going to say. But again, January 16th, next week, is the first budget workshop, possibly one on the 23rd. I would just want to go over a few more dates again. We have to adopt our budget on the 13th because the next day it's due. So we have no choice. We have to do it next month. And I think it's the 21st of March when we're going to be presenting to the Board of Finance. And then the other date that's kind of still iffy, we kind of touched on that, it's the meeting, which I need a quorum, by the way, everybody. I need to be at all these meetings. But the typical date is usually during our school vacation time. So we've asked the Board of Finance to possibly look at that date. Am I correct, Jim? We're looking at possibly changing that. So because a lot of parents actually go out of town, so we want the public to be around as much as possible. So that's kind of in the works right now. So I wanted to go over that. And again, even if there's a parent who has a question about the budget process, they can email the superintendent also, because that will be an opportunity for him to explain before the question's asked at that night, because sometimes, again, that information may not be on the top of Paul's mind or Marty's mind. So if you have any questions ahead of time, please feel free to ask us ahead of time. I guess that's it for me. I just want to remind the public that we will be going into executive session. We will not come back out live, but any action after that will be in our minutes online. So I do need to make a motion to move into executive session at 8:25 to discuss a personnel matter on the memorandum of understanding and inviting Dr. Semmel.
So moved. Second.
Melissa, second. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Are we going to go into the conference room like we always do?